The remaining parts of the core consist of assembled diamond pieces which come together into a spherical layer which is hollowed so it can be fitted on the orbit of the central solid sphere. These pieces come together and are fitted by their own weight and gravity, so they are set in place without welding, additives, or soldering. They simply fit into position. Each of these diamond layers acts as a spherical coil. Each is fully embedded when assembled as to perfectly resemble a solid impermeable surface that's airtight. So it cannot be accessed once it's fully fitted into place. So if you understand my writings and the things that I talk about, I have always made reference to this idea of spherical coils. So a spherical coil is exactly what I just described. So when you're creating infinite energy, so remember, this is the blueprint of infinite energy generation, but at the large scale of creating universes that create central suns, that create everything that exists, which is what our planet is. So because this is who we are, you understand that the very first piece of this spheres within spheres mechanism is a pure diamond core, a solid diamond, which is a sphere that is not hollowed. But that sphere itself is just the beginning. It needs to have layers upon layers upon layers. So it's spheres within spheres within spheres. So how can you cover a sphere with a sphere? Well, the first one needs to be the core, which is solid, which is what I said, which is that mechanism that starts the process of infinite energy generation, which is a generator. This is why it needs to be pure, and it cannot be hollow because it cannot have a space vacuum structure within it that creates bubbles. It needs to be solid. It cannot have a vacuum within it. It needs to be pure. So because of it, that is why it's not hollow. But then all the other layers that you add are hollow. Essentially, it's just a casing. It's like a shell, right? That you add on top of this sphere that is solid, right? And how do you make sure that the surface of these spherical coils that you're adding on top of this core that is solid, they themselves have a pure surface that looks perfectly smooth and is incredibly, it doesn't have any holes and it's not a mesh. It's actually just a pure solid that if you look at from the outside, you think it's just a sphere that could be solid. So how is that possible? Well, we as a species have discovered mechanisms of engineering in which we don't need any welding, soldering, or additives. We just use gravity itself as the mechanism to fit things into place. So we create mechanisms that assemble into position because of its own design, spherical in nature. When they come together, they just connect and and they just, you see, they intertwine, and when they connect, they just fit into position, and gravity itself creates the vacuum and puts them together, and when it puts them together, it's smooth and it cannot be open again because because remember, it's hollowed, it has a vacuum within it because it has air within it. When you remove that air, it becomes a vacuum, and a vacuum needs to be filled. And when you add that pressure of the vacuum puts those pieces together into that specific arrangement, which is spherical and is a coil. And because it's a coil, it spirals within it, then it comes in, whoop, and when it comes, it becomes this hollowed sphere, which is a coil that is smooth and it's airtight. So if you look at our ancient structures all over Bolivia and Peru and all over the world, really, you would see that the very ancient structures which were built by us, our ancient civilization, they're massive stones and boulders of manufactured stone masonry that we did with technology. And when we did those, you see the mechanisms in which when they interlace is very similar to those mechanisms. But when you look at those are different geometries and shapes. They're not spherical necessarily. But because of their own weight and their own gravity, they come into place and they fit into place, and they're stronger than any, screw or nail out there, or additive or welding or soldering, because you're adding tons of pressures, if not thousands of tons of pressure. And we're building a planet, and the core of it is 1% of its mass. Imagine the size of this coil, spherical coil, that you need to have to cover that, right? The space, the area of that volume. So you imagine how many thousands of tons. We're talking about millions of tons, if not. And it's a thin layer. It's not as thick as you think. It's just, an inch or so, perhaps less, because it's a thin film of diamond. So, but because it's so massive and so large, it represents enormous amounts of weight. We're talking billions of tons, right? Billions of tons, just of the layer, this foil, right? Which is actually diamond and is pure. And it's all these pieces that come together. And when you remove the pressure out of it, then it just comes together, pop, into place. And because it's thousands upon thousands of billions of metric tons of weight of diamond, then that weight, that gravity puts it together. And it creates this incredibly strong, indestructible, really, is because of the energy that it has, that it's just this thing that is airtight. And then you think of that, so that's what these layers upon layers upon layers upon layers, and each new layer is on top of each, and this is how it goes. It's with these spheres within spheres. So this is how the process works, right? It's beautiful. It's human design. It's human engineering, the most advanced in existence.